Corrupt Authority by yours truly. Hibiki withdrew Snorlax and hurried back to his companions. He could feel the gaze of all the eyes looking back and forth between his own group and the new arrivals. He could also make out a few whispers, mostly in odd reference. "Red, it's really him. What do we say to him? Ian, say something." The boy with the narwhal Pokemon, apparently Ian, stepped forward. He was dressed in black pants and a hoodie, and wore glasses that seemed to reflect any light, giving a sense of glowing eyes. He approached Red, followed by the girl with the winged horse, and both of them bowed at the waist. "Master Red, I'm Ian, and this is my sister Ivy." He glanced distrustfully at Kenta. "I thought this guy was a guard at first, but—" "He's with me," said Red, raising his hand and indicating at Hibiki and Bill. "They all are. Thank you for stepping in, but who are you?" "We are the Vanguard," said Ian in a strong voice, as he and his peers stood up straight. "And we have made it our mission to fight on the side of all free trainers at the front lines." "That fight is still a few hours away," said Kenta hurriedly. "And you may have started it too soon. You heard what that guard said. We must assume backup is on its way. If you want to be there for the final battle, you guys had better scatter for now." "We started exactly as we meant to," Ivy cut in confidently. "But you're right. We mean to wreak a little havoc here and there and distract him until Brendan starts the real fireworks." Her gaze turned upon Hibiki. "He's nearby, isn't he? Aren't you that kid who's always hanging around him?" Hibiki's stomach did a flip. He hadn't expected anyone to recognize him. "Is it really that obvious who I am? I need a haircut or something." "And elevator shoes," Kenta added with a hint of a smirk. Ivy looked back and forth between Kenta and Hibiki, and suddenly her eyes widened as revelation struck. "Wait, it's you!" She pointed at Kenta. "You're him! Brendan!" Her hands flew to her mouth in excitement. "Oh my gosh! I didn't think... Brendan! There's so much I have to tell you!" Hibiki caught movement in his peripheral vision, and he glanced up at the sky to see a group of flying Pokemon headed their way. They were not yet close enough to determine exactly, but they were large size and carrying riders. Bill followed his gaze, and he touched Red's arm nervously. "We've got company." "There's never any time," muttered Kenta. "Sorry, Ivy, but we have to go. See you at the Indigo League Stadium." "Wait!" Now Ian spoke up, looking at Ivy. "I can take our people out of here. Can you go with Brendan's group and fill him in?" "Fill us in?" Hibiki repeated. Red looked back into the cave, still looking skyward. "Gold, we really have to go." Kenta turned and waved for his companions to follow him. "All right, let's do whatever, but we gotta disappear. Come on!" They ran into the darkness, aided only by the glow coming from Red's Pikachu. Barely a minute later, they could hear the faint noise of commotion outside, carried through the tunnel by echo. They plowed on regardless, not stopping until Red suddenly jerked to a halt and put out his arm to stop the others. He waved them behind a cluster of rocks, and there they gathered, panting softly in the dark. "What? What is it?" breathed Bill. "There's a light ahead," Red whispered, "coming from the tail of an Ampharos. I think we've caught up to that Topaz girl who went before us, and, well, no need to draw more attention to ourselves." Hibiki yelped suddenly as he felt something sharp prick him in the back. He turned to see the winged horse Pokemon retreat backwards, head lowered apologetically. "Galacorn, watch it with that horn!" Ivy hissed in a reprimanding voice. The light ahead of them faded slightly as Topaz and her Ampharos appeared to move on. Still they waited, and they could hear no further noises behind them. "I guess the military police all went after your group," reasoned Bill. "Will they be okay?" "Yeah, they're good at escaping," Ivy replied, though not in a completely certain voice. "We practiced getaways and what we'd say and do if we got caught." "And what was that?" asked Kenta. 4 words only. Long live free Japan. It's a bit too simplistic, but none of us really wanted to think about actually being taken in." "Oh? How long have you been thinking it over?" "Since the moment our Pokemon were stolen." Ivy's eyes glittered in the dark. "There have been many rebel groups that have formed together since you went out and spoke to the public, Brendan," she said. "But we have been active since long before that." Hibiki's curiosity piqued. "Ivy? You say that there are other groups?" "Of course. Off the top of my head, there's the Johto Ronin, the Release, the Neoseki Hotai, the Dragon Tamers Union. You get the point. They're all underground, of course, but civilian militia nevertheless. That's what happens when your police become Imperial pawns. People take matters into their own hands. As Ivy continued to talk, she began bringing up instances of brutality and violence, all of which had escalated tensions toward civil war. Outspoken critics of G.R.I.P would suddenly find that their houses had been vandalized or burned down. A couple had been hurt or outright killed in supposed hit-and-run accidents. Some had simply vanished altogether. It had become a deadly game, not only to question the G.R.I.P policy, but merely to ask what had become of its most outspoken detractors. Hibiki's eyes grew wider and wider as he continued to listen, hardly able to believe his ears. Much of this was news to him, having lived in the relative isolation of New Barktown with nothing at all but a controlled media on television to listen to. Things were worse than he had thought, yet he had somehow missed it all. "Ivy," said Red, joining the conversation, "you must have known what we were preparing to do at the Indigo League. How is that?" Ivy smiled. "That's easy. We got word from friends who had gone to the Johto Pokeball Craftsman. It was short notice, but here we are." "Word sure travels fast," said Bill with a low whistle. "Considering how far away the Heron region is, few people here would recognize your Pokemon, Galacorn, the first recorded Pokemon of pure light type." Ivy nodded toward her winged horse, with the horn that had poked Hibiki. "He's not technically in the Uber tier," she said, "but Galacorn's the next thing to it. I'm amazed that I've been allowed to keep him for this long." "Nobody should have to think like that," said Kenta, clenching his fist. "And we're going to change it. Come on, let's get to the end of this road." As they continued onward through Victory Road, the group occasionally came across the site of Johto's strongest wild Pokemon population, or at least they would have been, if not for those inhabiting Mount Silver. Most of the cave creatures kept to themselves, withdrawing from the light of Pikachu's glow. Golbat would flitter around the cave ceiling, and Wild Graveler would press themselves into the wall. However, just before they reached the end, the party witnessed a clash between two wild Pokemon. They had heard the roars before they saw the combatants. A massive bear Pokemon lumbered about, swinging wildly at a spinning ball that seemed to constantly elude its claws. The ball suddenly uncurled, revealing a miniature elephant with a solid build and wicked-looking tusks. The elephant Pokemon trumpeted and slammed its forelegs into the ground, creating a tremor that Hibiki felt even from where he was standing. It was nowhere near the power of Kenta's Salamence, but it was enough to rock the bear off its feet. The elephant curled itself up again, and spinning forward, plowed into the downed bear with the force of a cannonball. The bear flew through the air and smashed into a stalagmite, roaring in pain. It got up, clutching its arm, and stared at the elephant Pokemon across the floor. The elephant snorted threateningly, and this cowed the bear into retreating into the darkness. "A Donphan and an Ursaring," muttered Bill. "I wonder what they were fighting about." Hibiki stared at the elephant, the Donphan, with a vigorous excitement he'd never felt before. He turned to Kenta, grinning from ear to ear. "That was the coolest thing I've ever seen in my life!" he gushed. "Did you see that? That Donphan did a sonic spin dash and knocked that bear on his ass!" Kenta looked at him with bemusement. "You like Donphans, huh?" he said. "Maybe someday, when things have cooled down, you can own one." "Yes! My life would be complete!" Excuse me," Bill spoke up. "I believe this is about as far as I can go without attracting attention. The cave's exit is just ahead, right?" They all looked onward. There was indeed a faint glow of sunlight just around the far bend, and no doubt, silhouette police guards stationed at the sides to double-check the masters that came through. Hibiki suddenly realized the folly of his situation. Things had not worked as they had planned. Bill would stay in the cave, but he himself should have been in the seats of the stadium crowd by now. "I need to set up here," Bill continued, withdrawing the signal disruptor from his cloak. "This dark clothing should help me blend into the cave, but I've got my Exeggutor and Red's Pikachu if I do get attacked." He looked at Hibiki and Ivy. "What will you two do?" Hibiki shook his head. "I've got to get to my stadium seat somehow, but if security's half as tight as I expect, I'm certain they'll have cameras or something on the cave's exit." Ivy smiled and patted her horse Pokemon's neck. "Where are you supposed to sit?"